Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm catching up with Peter Donegan just to chat with him and see how he's going and what he's been up to. And he's got a couple of pretty decent awards he's been involved with, and so he talks through them. And it's pretty cool hearing about one of them being a school garden. And he talks about the how to be better if there was a more concerted effort in getting kids gardening. And he also talks about his recent trip over to Turkey and what that was all about, as well as potentially popping back out to Australia in the near future. So absolutely love chatting with him again. It's awesome. I love talking to him, just hearing how creative he is and um, the ideas behind the designs he comes up with. So absolute joy for me to talk to him, and hopefully you enjoy listening to him as much as I do. So here is Peter Donegan. Well, Peter, thank you for joining us again on the Landscaping Podcast. I had to get you on because Paul Pritchard was starting to creep up on your appearance record. So you had to make sure that you're still number one guest on the podcast. But you've been busy. You've been doing a lot of things since I last spoken to you. I haven't had a look. I should have had a look when it was last you were on, but it would have been at least a year ago, I reckon.
I can't remember when I was last on, Joel, but genuinely, I can't remember. I think because I hear your voice in my ears weekly at this stage of the game. And before I go any further, never mind Paul's giant-sized ego, but the interview you did with Tyler, I I sent you a note on that one saying I basically could have listened to the both of you live forever and ever in some sort of Truman Show type thing. I think the guy is an enigma anyway. And then wrap the two of you in together, and I just thought it was beautiful and hilarious at points, maybe sometimes unintentionally, but at the same token, the guy is just an enigma, and I'm in awe of anybody who's got that sort of character built into their DNA. He really just makes me smile every time I hear him, and you too as well. So, yeah, congratulations. Go, anybody who's listened to this, stop. Go and listen to Tyler's interview. Ignore me. He's far better than I will ever be, and yeah, well done. So there you go.
Yeah, he is a fascinating person to talk to because when you messaged me, I said to you that he's like he gets along like with a full range of people, like socioeconomic backgrounds. Like he would speak to the Queen, get along really well, and he speaks to people like me as well. And yeah, he just really gets along well with everyone, really.
It's look, their characters are sorry, their qualities in a character that sort of I go back and say it, mom and dad would have reared us. I'm one of eight children. You remain humble at all times. You're I'm segueing slightly here, but I'm never photographed on my own with an award type thing. There's a sort of a case of, who rides with you in the limousine has got to be able to ride with you on the bus as well. And yeah, he has all of those traits to him. And again, what a good man. And speaking to another good man, which is you. So yeah, loved every second of it.
I'm just looking up the episodes now, and it could be it was your preview before the show garden, I think, unless I had you back on after that. So I don't think I had you on after that, did I? It would have been March 2024.
March 24 is that long? I don't know. It doesn't matter, Joel. Time means nothing to two guys who daydream like me and you. Yeah, it's all good. It's good to see you again anyway.
Likewise. But
Yeah.
you've been popping up, winning some awards, which is like some pretty epic ones. Just tell me about that experience. Was that with the APL or was that a different one?
The, well, the APLD is the United States Association of Professional Landscape Designers, and the garden was the 2024 Melbourne Mifkis garden. And this is going to sound, I don't know how to make it sound because I'm always sort of nervous in wording this the wrong way because Martin Semkin will agree with me on this one. The reason for doing the garden and the second garden at Mifkis, the veterans garden as I call it, was never for me, really. And I've said this to you before. It would have been easier for me to put in a kitchen and a canopy or some sort of paving and, done a beautiful garden the same way the guys at Mint sort of do it. And no, that's no reflection on them. I'm just saying from me, but somewhere in between, illogic takes control of the logic, and the little people in my head go, "Do you know what you should do? Instead of doing a garden that will actually bring you in business, you should put a plane over a garden and do one for people who need a spotlight shone upon them. And don't worry about the mortgage. The bank manager will understand perfectly, and just forget about all that stuff and give it all away, if you will." And that became the story ultimately of the Veterans Garden. And I regret none of that, but I appreciate the logic behind the scenes that makes my accountant scream a lot. Pause. Next chapter. The the thing with the veterans you start to realize, and the suicide rates and the homelessness and the ridiculous numbers that exist in that, and me not being a politician, and I don't want to do a politician's even hidden message. This was about the guy who came home post conflict. It wasn't about the politician, it was about him. It wasn't about the guys who said, let's press the red button. It was about what happens to him when he comes home, the individual, his wife, and those around. And when you go back 100 years and the work we had done in France, you start to realize that it was the same. Statistically, it was the exact same 100 years ago. And I'll quote what the director of the Castle Hervé said to me when I was over there. And I mentioned to him in doing the research for the Veterans Garden what became. And his note was, isn't it a shame that 100 plus years post the centenary of the ending of the First World War, that nothing has changed for the man on the ground? And that I find a little bit sort of shameful and sad coming from him. But when you get into the international part of it, an Irish guy designing a garden for Australian veterans, inverted commas, then when you put the garden to the guys in the United States, that's the sole reason for it. That it won award or didn't win award doesn't affect me, as you well know. I tend to give them all away anyway. And the judges' comments was probably the bit that made me kind of go that they got it. And for those who aren't aware, go to Instagram or one of those things, or Google Donegan APLD while you're listening to this, and you'll see the judges' comments, and it sort of, you start to realize, yes, it is international. Yes, they did get it. And most people in their head would turn around and say, but why did you do it? And the answer is not for Peter Donegan personal gain. Certainly, there's easier ways. Could get a job in a petrol station and make more money. And show gardening is as you well know, Joel, is it's an incomprehensible um, drug that you feel good about, but you don't know why, because you may as well take your money, throw it into a satchel, and just throw it into some river somewhere and watch it sail downstream, and it'll happen faster. Um, but I wouldn't swap it for anything in the world, and I know it's the same for you or anybody else who's doing it, but makes no sense. But it's beautiful, and so yeah, that was, look. I'd go back and say it gave a little bit of extra light to this sort of garden and the message that was sort of in there. And yeah, there you go.
What was the process like for that, for entering it in? What did you have to do?
It was pretty simple, I suppose, because obviously the drawings were already done and they had a show garden category. I don't think there's been an Irish guy sort of win it before. I know some of my colleagues in the UK have won APLD awards, and maybe I'm scratching my head to remember if there's anybody else really outside of that. I only know one or two in the UK who've done it. I'm not aware of how the judging process really works. I don't mean that to sound sort of arrogant or cocky, but I think in my head it's sort of, well, why wouldn't they give me an award? Which is the bit of not arrogance creeping in, but not confidence. Arrogance again suggests maybe there's a bit of ignorance to your confidence, if that makes any sense. But I think in my head, I just kind of entered because that's the right thing to do for the message. What's the judging process? How that all works? I genuinely mean this, Joel. I paid zero attention to any of that. I'm probably a little bit infantile in what happens in between me sending them information, them judging it, and what happens at the far end. I think in reality, the only thing I knew was that Melbourne judges obviously gave the Garden silver, and I didn't believe for 1 minute that the United States judging panel were going to supersede Australia's judging panel and give it gold. But the garden had an incorrectness to it, horticulturally and design wise, anyway, intentionally to portray the message better. And to put that in context for your listeners, if you look at the 2023 garden I had done, the one with the 45,000 litres of water, the judge's note on that was that if we'd replaced the hedge running up the left hand side, 20 metres long, with a stone wall, we would have got 2 points extra. But as Martin Semkin would say, that would have killed the entire love story that went with the garden. So there's judging and there's the right sort of message that you want to convey. We've conveyed the message. I knew it wouldn't have got anything more than silver before I entered. I think when one of the judges came to me and said, you should come for feedback, and I say this very respectfully, and I genuinely mean that. I have huge respect for them. But I think I said to him, I said, look, I don't see really much point in going. And he said, I think you should. I think, if I remember correctly, I said, well, how about I give you your feedback on what your feedback will be? And I gave him their feedback, and he nodded his head and said, yes. So, like, it is what it is. You can't have a garden set in 1984 that's correct, but I understand the judging process. And it's meant to be the story of a broken man, but I understand also judging rules, and that's that. So, job done. I was never the joint-sized ego. The veterans were. Did I do right by them? Yes. Did people smile when they came to the garden and then sort of, I guess, go to tears from one extreme of emotion, the highest of the high, seeing the plane, they walk up to it from the water feature, the building at your back, and then capitulate? Yes, they did.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. And I'll go back and say what I said to you in the original interview. Before that garden was built, my biggest fear in that garden was that I got it wrong by the veterans, and I would never have worked in Australia or internationally ever again. And I can't emphasize this enough. When you take a show garden of that stature incorrectly, intentionally done, you better make sure you have it right. And that photograph of you, I think I'm holding the jar of coffee and you're smelling it.
Yeah,
Dan the plant man took the photograph.
they did.
I think, yeah. And that to me was the one where, when you think about that, I won't dwell on this, for your listeners won't dwell on this too much longer. But when I think there was one of the production film crews, and the manager came in and she went across. Bear in mind, the roof of the building only went on a couple of hours beforehand. And she came in and she smelt the there was a coat hanging on the door, and she smelt it, and she said, it's just like my grandfather's. And uh, you see tears in the radio playing and the whole lot, and it just, how you do that in the space of a couple of hours doesn't happen by accident. But that's the bit where you can design something, and detail comes down to everybody else who's by your side, Nicole and Martin, and et cetera, et cetera. And having a 1983 original Royal Australian Air Force calendar hanging on one nail intentionally is, it's a little bit of poetry, and you leave it there, and people who needed a light were remembered and job done. So yeah, there you go. So that was that one.
We were
That
concerned
was that.
about how it was going to be received, like particularly with the veterans, but obviously they've been pretty happy with it because you're coming back next year to Australia.
Yeah, that was really weird. I say weird, not in a bad way. Weird as in, sort of, if you were describing how you met your wife, kind of thing. I don't know how you met her, but anyway, I'm segueing, and in my head, I don't have an analogy example for that. But Mike Dahan is one absolute gentleman, and if you were there at the show, you would have seen a guy with a white mustache and aviator sunglasses on, and the most piloty looking pilot I've ever seen in my lifetime, and just a beautiful man. I think case closed, and understood veterans, and as part of the Defence Force Welfare Association. And between him and Martin, if you're going to stand in front of a microphone with an Irish accent in brackets and speak about Australian veterans, you better know your shizzle, if I'm brutally honest with you. The same as when I was in France, you better know that Thiepval has actually got one Irish guy buried there where it's French one side and British the other, and there's one Irish headstone in the middle of it, and et cetera, et cetera. But I asked Mike for a quote for the APLD award, and in the quote, he wrote back to me, he announced that basically we're inviting Peter back to sign a permanent park. And I went, you're not, but Mike, you're not supposed to tell the kids what you got for Christmas. It's just, I meant to quote on the awards. But yeah, he put it in it. So I just, fine, fair enough. Okay, that's the quote I'll use. And that, bec that became, that became it. I thought it'd be a big sort of, you know, announcement, but now it's out there.
Just a random quote.
Yeah.
So
So that's
what are you actually doing when you come out?
well. This is the thing. I don't know what I'm allowed to. The whole
Yeah.
point is I don't know what I don't know what I was originally not allowed or allowed to say, and then Mike just went, here's all the information everybody might need to know in a few years' time. But they seem to have located a piece of land. I say a piece of land, a place for a park, and they're looking at putting a permanent one in. And I think it all started probably after the award in 24, and I think I left it for a while, and it sounds it sounds a bit silly, Joel, but when you turn around and you kind of go, like, this is a crying shame because never mind. And again, I'll say, never mind Peter and his joint-sized ego. Just stick with the veterans here. The garden gets smashed up or taken apart or brought back to Semkins Yard and it's placed away, and you're sort of everybody applauds it, and not Peter again, don't mind me, but everybody applauds the thing saying you're right, the veterans and remembering and all of those things. And you do the next official celebration day of what we're grateful for that they have done in their service, etc. And then time passes, and what happens next? And I said to Mike in an email, I said, it's kind of a crying shame that it's gone. And there should be a place where they're remembered. And he replied back basically saying, I was just about to mail you, we're aligned, we're on the same page. And it sort of started from there. So they found a place where I think it's already permitted they can build a memorial park. Don't know the exact location, but they seem to have that. They then went and got full agreement from the DFWA, the Defence Force Welfare Association, the RSL, Return Service League. Then I think after that it went sort of higher power, which it has to, and politicians and those in positions of authority. I think there's the money side of it and all those things, but I'm well used to dealing with this when it comes to sort of stuff in France and going back to do a second garden there. So having a great idea is one thing, having the agreement is another thing. And then I think somewhere in between, as I like to word it, mom and dad have to decide what's happening with little Joel or little Peter and how much pocket money they're going to give him to build the thing. And that's the bit where you turn around, you remain humble, and you just sort of leave it there. But yeah, by all accounts, it seems to be happening. I think that the point I'd make, Joel, and I made it to Mike, is that if you have a garden of remembrance, it's a place or a war memorial park even. They're places where you tend to go, and they're like old libraries. People go quiet when they walk in, and that's a place of reflection ultimately, where there's standard things internationally where you have ultimately what is a large plinth of white stone with a white cross at the back, and they have certain things that, again, I'll say it, are international in every single garden around the world. My note to Mike was, it can't be one of them.
That's exactly what I was thinking as well. It's not, I didn't want
And
it just to be like just it's a garden with a seat and a plaque in there. Like,
yeah, it can't be that. And then the alternative is it can't be a cemetery. And then the alternative is ultimately what. sort of kind of what we did in France, which is the note they had was that it's to remember the past, but with an eye to the future. And the point in the middle is that you make conversation happen. And so if you want to go and reflect, that's absolutely fine. But if your 4-year-old son wants to know, apologies for saying this, and I hope I say this eloquently, but if your 4-year-old son wants to know what happened to dad or mom, you can have that conversation there rather than feel like you're whispering or you need to kneel and reflect if that makes better sense to you. And it's that balance between, and this is only in text format, but it's that balance between being allowed to stay longer. Children are allowed to run around in the same way we did it with the plane. You're allowed to smile if you go there and only see that. But if your mom or dad want to explain something to you, or you want to explain it to your little brother, you're allowed to turn around and sort of have that as well. And nobody's going to criticize you. And if children want to run through, then fine. So you tend to find that things become sort of I'm hesitant to say subliminal, but they become a little bit metaphor rather than here's a big cross and we'd like to thank and here's all the people. And there's conversations again happening with mom and dad, and they'll decide what's
Mm.
going to happen after that. But the remit has to be like France. If you take the first garden, for those who aren't aware, it's Chateau de Perron. It's just Google Donegan France garden and it'll come up. But the one in the dried up moat where they know there are still bodies beneath, where the castle has fallen 3 times, and it's the emblem of the town. And I'm humbled again that we got to do it there. But when you create conversation in a place where only bad things happened, then it makes it a little bit easier for a next generation to understand. It doesn't mean it repairs or fixes the past or changes the past, but it's hugely important. I mean, nobody ever gained from any war. Nobody ever gained from lots of people dying. Nobody ever gained from an incorrect brain post-conflict. But understanding why these things happen is huge. And look, what happens next? Again, I'll say it. It's for powers above my head and your head to say, okay, press the green button. Peter's coming. We've ticked all the boxes and everything's agreed. So let's see what happens. Yeah, but they have the location. It's agreed and everything's in place. It's just powers above.
And you'll wait for them to sort of give you the green light before you actually do a design, or have you sort of got some sort of thing in mind?
I think in any design in any garden we've ever done, domestic or otherwise, we tend to need to know two things: the design bit, the fee or invariably a non-fee is to the left hand side. The If you've only got $12 to build a garden on 2 hectares or 3 hectares, well, okay, my design is going to take 3 seconds and it's going to be one straight line. That's basically it, as you well know. So there's that. And then what you tend to find as well with it doesn't matter whether you're in France or otherwise, but what you tend to find is, that political, I say political, that governmental department will turn around and say, hey, listen, we're giving in X. Here's what we'd like in the garden. And in context, the one in France in the internal courtyard of the castle, we'd started doodling, and doodles is the easiest way to describe it. Oh, it'd be brilliant if we did X, and we're basically armchair pundit managers, if you will, saying, you know what they should do with this AFL team, blah, blah, blah. And we had it sort of set, I had it sort of set in my head, and then the director rang me and said, we need to put a full-size Panzer tank in the garden. Uh, And I went, I thought for a minute there you said a full-size Panzer tank in the garden. And he went, you're so funny, Peter. Yeah, full-size Panzer tank. I'll send you dimensions. And that was it. And a full-size Panzer tank went in because they decided it had to go there. We tried to put it 3.5 meters above head height. So you could, inverted commas, sit underneath it. And then it wouldn't have affected what I had drawn. And they came back and went, no, not happening. I'm not even going to try and do it now in a French accent, but no, it's not happening. So that becomes that. So you get sort of logic in doing these things, Joel. And sometimes again, yeah, there's the enthusiasm would get the better of me, but you just sometimes I just have to teach myself to chill out and relax, and patience is a virtue, and what's happening there, oh, don't worry, that's fine. Just yeah, yeah, there you go. Like sitting in
Yeah.
an airport lounge. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
And another award that you've been involved in, and it's still going because you've made it to the next level. What was that one that you won? Are you representing Europe in it? Is that?
That's ridiculous. Neither here nor there. I designed it. I designed a garden for a school in a part of Ireland called Sligo. So if you look at your map of Ireland, it's about 9 o'clock on the map over the west coast. And this has to be the greyest, most depressing. I mean, I don't mean that disrespectfully to the school, but the building is grey. It's surrounded by black asphalt. The ground in the internal courtyard garden is sodden and mushy. It had two or three very small trees. I mean, they might have been sort of waist height, the width of my thumb in it. Nothing really else to brag about. And I'll tell you a sort of a funny one, Joel. When I went and met Anne Gorby is the principal's name. I went and met Anne, and we sat in her office, and she told me a very vague story of two young women, if I may, two young girls, secondary school, so they're about 12, say, to 17, 18 years of age, and difficulties were being had in her life. And she called one of her friends to sit down with her in the school's principal's office, which was the only place she could think of that would allow two young women have a conversation. That was sort of personal. I don't know whether that makes sense, but sometimes the principal isn't the person to have the conversation with. You need to chat with your mate, if you will. And when I sat in the office, it was like concrete block walls with, painted, and one inspirational quote on the wall behind her desk. But concrete blocks are concrete blocks, and that's just that. And I looked out the window, and it didn't make me smile. It looked certainly nothing like your show garden in at Mifkus, your last one. And Anne sort of said to me, "Look, we need a place where we can do an outdoor classroom, which is fine. We need a place where they can sort of call their own, and we need a place where they can daydream." And that was the remit. I said, anything else? And she went, anything has to be better than out there. And she lifted up the blind, and I just, no. You'd have seen more life in a supermarket car park, to be quite honest with you. So I think we did the classroom and the water drains on chains, and it's sustainable drainage paving beneath, so the water comes down and then sort of disappears into itself, if you will. That was one. The seating was done in sort of precast, but it changed from a sort of an auditorium, sort of higher at the back, to leaning towards smaller at the front. And then we left, they were done in sort of hexagonal shape. So you left a void out, which coincidentally, inverted commas, without putting a giant sized wheelchair accessible supermarket car park painted sign on the ground, it was coincidentally more than enough room for a wheelchair to do full turning 16, 1800 millimeters, if you will. And it meant if you're tall or you're small, you can sit at the front or the back, or and a place for the teacher to do his thing. Fine, perfect. And then we designed them their own coffee shop, which was grand. But in normally where you have a coffee shop, you'd have sort of a separation between, say, the street and people walking past. And so in those high raised planters that stand at somewhere between waist and shoulder height, about 1450, 1150 high, we changed the planting to what would be used in their home economics and cooking classes, and made it sort of scented and edible, etc. And that was that. But that was only because when I was talking with Anne, she was sort of saying to me, look, we've a grow your own inverted commas vegetable area, standard issue that you stick into every school, and then you tick the gardening box, if you get me. And as she's saying it to me, I've got four sisters as well, Joel, I should add. So reared by women is an understatement. But as Anna's talking to me, saying we've got this vegetable area down there towards the football pitch, the girls are walking past, or the young women are walking past. There's more fake tan and nail varnish and manicured nails, and they're having mochaccino and cappuccinos, and the hair is being flung left, right, and center all over the place like some sort of movie scene. And I'm sort of saying in my head, my sisters had these nails. The last thing they're going to do during their lunch break is go down and start pulling carrots or potatoes. This isn't just, it's down there. They have it there already. So that became that. They had their own coffee shop, and then somewhere in between, I think I had this epiphany, and I'd been shopping, not shopping. I don't do online shopping, but I hit my phone by accident, and a thing called a Juicy Salif. It's an orange squeezer designed by a guy called Philippe Stark, and it's obviously only meant to be about the height of an iPhone standing up. And I hit my phone, Amazon, something, this thing pops up. I went, what the fudge? I don't do this shoppings. I don't even have an Amazon account, if you get me. And then, ooh, what's that? And I went, ooh. And then I think I messaged one of the girls saying, "Uh, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got it. I found the thing." And so I started doodling this. Ultimately, we took the height of your iPhone. I made it 3.5 meters. I gave it a fourth leg. If you're stuck and you're bored, just Google Juicy Salif, Salif, and you'll see it. Made it 3.5 meters tall anyway. And then I reckoned in my head the adults, because obviously it has to go to the Teachers Association and the Parents Association to get the green light. And I said that they're not going to let this across the line. Who wants a 3.5 meter tall orange squeezer painted, bright canary yellow? So I had an epiphany then, and I gave it a lobotomy. And I put an anemometer into the void at the top, and I relabeled it as a weather station.
What's an
And
anemometer?
it measures wind, so it's got those
All
cups
right.
that run around sideways. Yeah, so it goes into the lobotomy of the giant-sized now weather station, and everybody went, yeah, and I went, this is. I was like, it was. I couldn't believe it that everybody went, yeah. And then when I went and I presented it to the Students Association, they kind of, there seemed to be a query of whether the adults kind of got it, and you know they sort of loved it. So look, ultimately, it included a bit that maybe some adults wouldn't get. It included a bit where the coffee shop, where they could go and sit and feel in a place that was theirs, and yet could be used sort of greater socially. There's obviously no sort of elevations or steps, and everything is, accessibility is all taken into consideration. So we hit all of the falls. Maintenance is taken into consideration. It's interesting because one of the conversations I've had post this, Joel, is that there's a huge conversation happening, and has been for some time, far too long, if I'm brutally honest with you, far too long, of how young people and gardening and how you get them into it. And my note the last time I was asked on this was really simple. I said, look, your schools, you spend most of your time as a young adult up to 18 in either school or your home. Your school garden sucks. You've got a vegetable patch. One of the teachers has to fundraise for a glass house. This is ridiculous. You've got the best car park for the teachers to put their car in. You'd have more green again in a supermarket or an industrial estate. What the fudge is going on? You need to do something about this. And all of a sudden, I'm getting sent these notes of the students outside, and they're doing their art classes in their garden, in the school garden in wintertime. And it's amenity, inverted commas, horticulture, not growing vegetables in a glasshouse. Nothing wrong with that. Yes, learn how to grow your own. But if you've got a manicure and you're one of my sisters, you've no interest in that. You want to sit down in a park, and you shouldn't have to be brought to a park at the weekend. It should be at your doorstep. It should be right in front of you. The flowers, the rudbeckia should be, 4, 5, 6 foot tall, coming across the classroom window. And they have that now. And it's ultimately ridiculous that it takes a school fundraising thing. They'll give you a grant for a plastic football pitch, but you can't get one to put, and I mean it just in amenity horticulture, but yet the argument, inverted commas, or the Monty Don annual article in the Daily Mail or the Telegraph is children should garden more, for which no child or junior or young adult reads the Telegraph or the Daily Mail or the Monty Don article. So what's the point? Respectfully said to Monty, he knows how to do a headline, and he does a very good job at it. And that's, I mean it very politely. But there is a bit where you turn around and say, how do you expect the next generation to get into horticulture when they've got a sodden courtyard in a dark grey building, lifeless ultimately? And your question is what? So, what's the responsibility of us in a position of being able to make some change? Well, there you go. If you can build a show garden in 8, 9 days, then you can change a classroom in the next generation if you wish to. Ultimately, I'll fast track past that. I get invited to put a thing up for award for the European Pro Landscaper International Awards. And I put it up, and it goes up against it. This is, sorry, let me just, you're laughing, I'm about to laugh, but this is a 20 by 20 square meter garden, number one. And it goes up, it's shortlisted. There's only two shortlisted, which is really unusual because the rest of the categories are five. And it's shortlisted against a 20,000 hectare development in Portugal. So I have to go to London. I'm allowed 10 slides, photographs, and 10 minutes to present plus five. And my opening line while the 1 minute video was playing was, "Hi, I'm Peter Donegan. I'd like to welcome my Portuguese design associates who are in the room with us this evening. And I'd just like to point out, ultimately, in brackets, the elephant in the room, which is this is a 400 square meter courtyard garden in the west of Ireland where things are a bit grey. I'm an Irishman. I have Italian tan lines from the bicep down, and I'm pretty white everywhere else. Uh, it ultimately it is what it is, and theirs is giant sized, and this is small, and it won, and which is head scratching to, I guess, a guy who's more than capable of putting himself down before anybody else can, or not getting above my station. And it goes to Saudi Arabia to compete. We've already won it, self-deprecating in brackets again, but it goes to Saudi to compete against the other four continents for the world, which is ridiculous. I don't think any school garden has ever had such an accolade bestowed upon it. And but you got to go back to the source, Joel. It's like you were when you were talking about the Veterans Garden about the permanent one to be. In this case here, you have to turn around and give credit to a school principal who, when you look at the conversation that happened there, and I think I said to Anne, like, ultimately, what's your budget? Have you got one? And and sort of flipped the tables on me and said, "Look, I've listened to you speak. I'm paraphrasing her slightly, but I've listened to you speak, and we have to start with the daydream and then put it into a calculator and press the square root button, if you will." And so when we came to the course, I think I said to her, "Shit, how are we gonna? We love the design. Everything's accepted. That's fine. How are we going to do this?" And I think my first question to her was, "Well, do you know a painter?" And she went, "Yes." I went, "Do you know somebody who'll give you a free paint?" And she went, "Yeah." I went, "Okay. Well, that's the first part." I said, "Do you know somebody who'll come in and do a bit of excavation?" And she went, "Actually, I do." I went, "Okay, so that's the place cleared out. Break out all the parts. Here's what you do next. Keep me in touch. Do you know an architect?" And she went, "Yeah." I went, "Okay, so you can map out the drawings." She went, "Fine. Do you know a paving company who'll lay it for you?" She went, "I do. One of the students or their children are here." And fine. "Do you know a garden center?" And all of a sudden it became, pretty simple. You take it, it's like building a show garden and asking for everything for free. You'd sort of chink it down rather than say, "Oh my God, it's 350,000 or $500,000." And life becomes pretty simple because people have good hearts. The alternative to that is probably a school garden that I consulted, inverted commas, on. And it's a bit of a shame, Joel, because in that one, th before this garden had won award, maybe now I get to turn around and do my Liam Gallagher frontman Oasis impression and sail down the Thames in a boat. But I can tell you in that one, they did a concrete T piece of a path in the end in the courtyard garden, similar size. Two patches of grass either side of the concrete T piece. And at the end of the concrete T was a concrete plinth with a brass statue on top. And I described that ultimately as the basic definition of every single main street in every single city worldwide. Usually it's a politician, usually he's male, usually he's dead, and or of historic importance. And again, I say that politely. But if this was for a primary school, so ages sort of 4 to say 9 or 10, and I remember looking at it going, wait, what 5-year-old is going to turn around and say, oh my, let me sort of imagine poetry in my head based upon a concrete tea piece and a brass statue. You're off your trolley. And it goes back to that thing again. Look, you sh some things you shouldn't have to fundraise for. And in my head, there's a 5-year-old Peter growing plants under his bed. And it's as I said, when you get into garden design or garden building or gardens becoming real, it's engineering without you even realizing it. It's mathematics, it's art, it's poetry, it's history, it's every single piece of it. And it doesn't have to be sometimes the raised vegetable bed. Sometimes it's just a beautiful oasis of a fantastic looking landscape. If you're a school teacher listening to this, or you're a designer, ring the local school and just say, hey, you can have my time for free, and go down and doodle it on a piece of paper and figure out the business plan of how to get everything free gratis and make it happen, or do the bake sale. But I think that ultimately in the second school garden, the one I inverted commas consulted on or didn't put my name to, they did a bake sale. They raised $350 or $400, and that was the budget. The Parents Association won the battle, and the children gain nothing, and it dissipates into the ether. And in 5 years' time, somebody will have a brainwave, and you'll go press repeat. But yeah, that one. That
And
was that. Yeah.
how did you let Anne know that it when it won?
Um, I sent her. It's, so the subtitles here are sort of put yourself down, Irish genetics, don't get above your station. Peter's dad is sitting on his shoulder at all times, telling you shut up, listen, your brother needs to talk first. To all of that, those cliches that are taken as standard. I think I sent her a note saying, I'm put the garden up for award, and I'm just, yeah, fair enough. Uh, so look, we'll see what happens. Touche. And we're shortlisted. Yeah. Oh, well, that's great news. Let me know what happens next. Yeah, I have to go to London to present do the presentation. Yeah. And then, and we won. And then my phone started ringing. But gee, I was like, yeah, I don't want to do a high-pitched Irish woman's voice going at 120 million miles an hour. But yeah, Mark Gregory was sitting beside me, and he was in the Excel in London, and I sat down the back into the in behind him, and he was one of the judging panel for it. And I sort of hid in the corner down the back of the room. And he went, "What are you doing here?" Sort of, and we were shooting the breeze, and I was laughing, going, "Stop with you." And then, bingo bus at one. But it's look, it's not that I'm not confident. It's not that I'm not confident. I can tell you if the show garden's going to get silver or gold or 2 points less or more. But I think when it comes to judging a 20,000 hectare development, politely and respectfully said to my colleagues in Portugal, you, you, I paid I pay sort of sometimes little attention to what everybody else is doing, because if you did, you wouldn't design a school garden with a juicy salif or an orange squeezer in it that's 3.5 meters tall, which becomes a weather station, etc. But if you start to consider what everybody else is doing, then you don't put that garden up for award. You put something more formal up for award. And then it becomes a case of, well, they've put up this humongous development. and so we should try and match that. But you're taking somebody else's what they're doing into consideration that affects yours. And so I paid. It's that once it goes to judging, it's sort of that old sort of adage, Joel, as I said when I was judging the what do they call it, the category at MIFGUS for the
Is it the border gardens or the achievables?
achievable gardens, yeah. And when I was doing them, I remember giving they said to me, look, you've the NGIV said, look, you've got a, I'll paraphrase them politely, but you've got an Irish accent and we don't. And this was at their presentation night. Will you just sort of say a few words? And I remember standing up, and I mean this exactly what I said, and I stand by it. You've got two options as a garden designer. You can do the patch of grass 1 meter by 1 meter and say I was inspired by a piece of Wimbledon. And the judges, assuming the garden is accepted, have to say, well, it looks like it, smells like it. Must be it, gold. Done. I said, or you can do the Sex Pistols down the Thames when they get arrested and it makes the headlines and it launches Richard Branson. They become one of the greatest rock and roll bands that ever, existed, still in memory to this day. And playing music on a river is nothing new, but getting arrested and hitting the headlines and the youths identifying with you at that time when 1980s England was in a little bit of turmoil, if I may, is a new kind of euphoria all of a sudden. So you have an option as a designer, which is sort of to set the world alight. And I think I sort of stand by that, but I also appreciate that the judges may turn around and go, well, this one we think is better. That's okay. We were shortlisted. This is a school garden in the west of Ireland, politely put. That's no reflection, nothing to do with garden design, but a school garden in the west of Ireland, which is 20 by 20 square meters, shortlisted for any award is good enough. Thanks very much. Job done. Then it wins. Now it goes to Saudi. And you have to scratch your head and go, this is the equivalent of Ireland. Our last message, by the way, beaten Portugal and Hungary and Troy Parrott scoring 5 goals in 2 games to qualify for the playoffs, to qualify for the World Cup. And that is just sort of beautiful poetry and ridiculous. And the daydreamers, if I may, all of a sudden get a round of applause. And if I do have a hope in all of this, I think it's that some other designer or school genuinely turns around and says, well, if they can do it, why can't we? And then these conversations of, little Peter Jr., 5 years of age, growing plants under his bed in 1980s Ireland don't become sort of laughable and they become a little bit more the norm. And it should be that, and it's not. But at least it's not an article in a Daily Mail. I mean, if Monty Don goes and I'm not slagging Monty here, by the way, but if another designer, gardener, TV persona wants to do something, but quit writing articles in national newspapers and just you've got the power to make it happen. And now I've got Jim Carrey when he's what's that movie where he does the I've got the power. He's plays
The, the Bruce Almighty?
Bruce Almighty, that's the one. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's I don't want to do the high pitched I've got the power song but in my head it's playing. And look, we've got an ability to make things change, and sometimes you just need to be a little bit pretend you're a child and everything goes according to plan a little bit brighter and better, and that's okay. You know,
So
still
you
go.
going over to Saudi? Do you go there and present it?
It looks like that's looks like that's the case. That's the case. Yeah, Joe.
Is that
Yeah.
June next year?
I think it's June. Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
drag
yeah.
it out, don't they?
Yeah, they do a bit, but I understand there's 4 or 5 other continents, like the circle thing or the spherical circle. I'm a non-believer. No, I'm joking. The spherical thing we live on, so I don't fall off the edge of the world.
The pancake.
This, yeah, the spherical thing we live on, I believe, is quite vast, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
You would
yeah,
know.
it's a
You've,
good
you've
day.
traveled a bit of it.
I'm I've God Almighty, Bruce Almighty. I don't know how. I I I don't know how half of the stuff in my life happens. He says is a sort of a pub conversation. But look, I'll say to anybody listening to this, I think like Tyler and Ash Walker and people you've interviewed, I think there's a lot of good people out there, Joel. And I think if you ask Ash how he ended up, in Dublin in my home, well, ultimately a good man with good qualities, reared well, who says hello, goodbye, and thank you, who worked on the garden in Melbourne with Ben of Yards Landscaping and Martin, etc., sends an email saying, hey, and then you ring Joel and Joel goes, yeah, Ash is a good guy, or Ben's a good guy, or he's a good guy, and doors open. I don't mean doors fly open. You got to earn your stripes, but I'm pretty humble at all times, and my accountant is consistently not pleased with me because the little monkeys in my head go, "Do you know, it'd be great if we did." And you go, "No, you need to charge people money. Stop doing things like this. You need to make some money. The lights won't stay on if you don't." But I go, "Yeah, but isn't it good fun?" Do
Yeah.
you want to know the funniest one, Joel? I didn't realize this. The French Ministry of Culture gave the castle gardens included. Is it? I I don't know what they've called it, Joel. You'll have to excuse me for a moment. So I get the wording right. One
Yep.
moment. They gave it the label Architecture Contemporary Remarkable Contemporary Architecture label. It was described to me like a Michelin star for buildings that are not historic because they're not older than 100 years. But I found out like a year and a half after they after they gave it the award. I didn't know they'd awarded it this prestigious huge thing, and it's kind of like I don't want to say a Nobel Prize because that means I'm getting far too big-headed. But Henry Siriani is the building architect. So let me backtrack this for your listeners. The castle is 13th century, falls under Franco-Prussian, the First World War and the Second World War. Good, not good, but full stop. Henry Siriani comes along, a famed architect, huge CV, ridiculous things he's designed, and puts this ultimately a join to the back of the castle, which then becomes Europe's largest war museum. I'm brought in 2018 and I designed the garden and the dried up moat. And then the castle invite me back and say, will you design a second garden in the inner courtyard? So they join the landscape architecture and the building architecture, the two gardens meeting the old and meeting the new, and they give it the contemporary architecture label, remarkable contemporary architecture label. And I'm scratching my head saying, I, I, I don't, I don't know what happened. It and it's up there. It's that tripartite moment. And if any of your listeners, if you don't have this and you've never heard it, go and find the commentary, the Irish commentary of Troy Parrott scoring the goal against Hungary in the last minute. And just the screams of elation. And I'm in a small farming town. I opened the front door and I could hear the screams from 2, 3 miles away. Half of them were sheep, the other half were cows. The whole country literally screamed in delight. And this is a very eloquent, close equivalent of what happened in my heart, where you remain humble and you do the right things by the right people. I'll give you a really interesting one. The Landscape Institute, I put the first garden, second garden, my apologies, the inner courtyard one, up for award. The Landscape Institute, I don't think I've told anybody this before, so apologies to the LI. They wrote back to me when I put it up for award and said we didn't feel that it added anything to the castle. Okay, that's number one. Maybe you can turn around and go, well, I didn't give them enough information. But the remit of the castle was to attract a younger and newer audience. So quite like what happened in Sligo, if the adults don't get it, that's okay. Bearing in mind, this is a place where it remembers a lot of harrowing and hard hitting things I wouldn't show anybody's child. But yet they need museums need to attract a newer audience in because that's the circle of life. And they need to do that. So for the old folks, the older generation, if I may, not to get it, that's all right. I don't mind if the Ally don't get it. The point about this is I did right by the French in my head, or the people of Peron and its town, and you keep the castle alive. And they do tours of both gardens now, and they charge for that, and people stay longer. And if you stay longer, you spend more money. Football clubs are trying to do something similar in creating a small town ultimately where you go rather than just the pitch and watch the game and then go home. And in this one here, ultimately, the Ministry of Culture gave it its highest honor, and I think I now get to turn around and go, "That's okay, job done. I've looked after who I was meant to look after." But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well,
It's a
you can't please
sorry.
everyone.
No, and I again, I'll say it, Joel. Sometimes you need to do the Sex Pistols down the Thames in the boat. I mean, there's a place for, as I spoke in Trabzon, there is a place where a garden designer, landscape architect does well to remember that there is a building there and you shouldn't compete with the building. You create an allure, if I may, to the front door or to what is eloquent and elegant. And you should, there's a balance required there. They're not the gardens sometimes that hit the headlines, but the architecture building may.
Mm.
And a good landscape architect will know when to sort of put his head above the water or just remain sort of in a calm, placid place. But I think here, yeah, I think I've the little boy from Dublin who was told to shut up for most of his life seems to have done something okay. And who wins, if I may, it's not so much me. It's those who employed you to design the thing. So yeah, I did the right thing, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was good.
And
Yeah.
something only just trigged in my mind before when you're talking about Troy Parrott and Ireland making the playoffs is that one of those games they had to win, they beat Portugal, and you also beat Portugal to get through yeah, to the world to the world
They
champs.
they had to win 3 games on the trot is the reality of it. And they won basically all three on 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 the bounce. But I think beating a team with Ronaldo in it and then beating Hungary in the last second, I mean it's the stuff movie dreams are made of. And I mean, Jamaica, we have a bobsleigh team is sort of one way of wording it. And this is probably a close second. I think it's 22 or 23 years since Ireland qualified for a World Cup. This is pretty big. We haven't done it yet, but
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah, a bit like Peter being shortlisted. I'll take that, and anything else
And
after that is sort of a bonus.
you're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah, yeah. What a great movie. Yeah, one in a million. We'll take it. Yeah, look, it's a ridiculous, beautiful, lovely moment, and yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it.
And you
You
just got
know.
back from Turkey, so what were you doing over there?
So Trabzon University invited me over to do a lecture thing with them, and then to spend a little bit of time, I guess, with the students looking at some of their work. And the university were joined, I should add, with the TMMOB, which is how do I call it, the Landscape Architecture Chamber, the Chamber of Landscape Architects, my apologies, of Trabzon, teamed up with the university and they asked me to come over. So the first part was a lecture, which is a little bit odd always when I I don't know, there's a moment when do you know when somebody waves to you in a crowd and you sort of look behind to see if they're waving at you? Okay, well, I look out to the audience. This may only exist in my head, but this is how it feels. I look out to the audience and full lecture hall, people standing in the doorway. There's no seats available anywhere, no steps available. But I look out to the audience and I'm wondering what they're looking at because their faces are in quintessentially correct English aghast. And then I look over my shoulder and I realize what's on the screen behind me, which is it didn't matter what was on the screen, it was just a bit new or different or unique, as my mother used to call me, Joel. And when you put a slide of explaining how an orange squeezer from Amazon ends up becoming a weather station, I think there's probably something in there. And then I think the biggest one was ultimately the first garden at Mifkas, very politely noted, which I think the story of how you convey a reflection across a water through a tree and the emotion in behind that, I think probably was something a little bit different as well. So there's the without making a joke out of myself, but Orange Squeezer is a decent laugh if you tell the story correctly in a pub. In reality, when you place into a garden, you explain the reason behind it. There has to be an eloquence to it and a reasoning for it, and there was. When you put a plane over a garden, I appreciate the smile may come, but there's a reason behind because you need the highest to the high, to the lowest to the low. We ultimately designed an emotion, and I think in the story of the first garden in Mifkas, the one with the 45,000 litres of water, I think that still sort of gets me in a gulp in my throat when you start to realise how Mark Bent's, Martin Semkin's business partner, rest his soul, who was Nicole's godfather, and the locket on the end of the table and the stories in there that were unknowns to me at drawing point and then became extremely personal. And when we did the talk at Ferny Creek Horticultural Society with the Alpine Society by their side, beautiful people, I remember that photograph came up on the screen and Martin over the microphone said, "Do you want me to do this bit?" And I just went, "Please." I still can't do it without getting the Jerry Maguire gulp in my throat. And if you've got a heart and you've got emotion, or you're Irish and or Australian, or in this case even from a town in Turkey or a city in Turkey called Trabzon. And again, I'll say what I said at the start: we're very closely aligned in that emotional triangle. Then I think it caught other people's hearts as well. It's just that gardens maybe aren't designed that way sometimes, and you sort of turn the movie screen back to front, if you will, and people see the how it's all pieced together a little bit. And I think that was a sort of an eye opener for a lot of them. But yeah, no, the chamber brought me across. I think on the second day we did some sort of city tourism when I was in their offices, and they presented me with a Trabzon jersey. 61 is the area code, so that was put on the back of the jersey, and Donegan on the bottom of it, which was a huge proud moment. And then somewhere in between, obviously they were asking me, about my relationship with Turkey prior to, and I was sort of saying, well, the Australian embassy, funnily enough, invited me to the Anzac Memorial Day in Dublin here a while ago, and I met the Turkish ambassador, and so the Turkish and the Irish and the Aussies would have fought side by side, and that was one part. And then they there's another story then with Trabzonspor, which is their football team, but Trabzon the town. When Ireland was going through the potato famine, they sent food from Trabzon to Drogheda, just up the road from me here. It's about an hour away, somewhere between, say, Dublin and Belfast. You got this town in the middle, and they sent food over there. So the crest of and the colours of Drogheda United, the crest is the sort of the moon and the it's the Turkish flag ultimately. It's ridiculous the join between the two towns, and you're scratching your head going, we are close, we are closer than you realize, absolutely sort of aligned, but beautiful people, beautiful welcome. Same welcome I would have got from you or Martin Semkin and Anne and Nicole and Drewy and his family. And Same thing, my mother would have given you my dinner, Joel, if you came across and I was getting there, and you're kind of going, well, isn't that a nice DNA to have sort of born into you? And yeah, yeah, what a talented, beautiful bunch, and a humbling privilege. And apparently I left a lasting legacy on the students. And I think my response was, well, like I hope I hope they don't need sort of shock therapy afterwards, kind of thing. And he went, no, no, it's like it's all good. But it's I get it. The stuff I do is maybe a little bit. We do calm stuff, but that doesn't hit the headlines. And the stuff that does hit the headlines always seems to have a bit of a story in it. And and if that, look, if it makes somebody else smile, that's great. If it wins a shiny thing, that's great. It was never the objective. I can't help but put myself down before anybody else does, so I query it a lot and then wonder why or how. Same way you do, and you'd be right. And then I came home, and the Association of Professional Landscapers in the UK had announced that I'm hosting their awards in March in London. And I went, I what? Who's?
Did you do that earlier this year as well?
I did it in March, and so Phil Tremaine is the head don of the APL, surrounded by a plethora of again, I'll say there's a common denominator in all these places, Joe, where I end up. And like genuinely, I mean this. When I say humble, when you Mom's old quote was like, "Show me who your friends are. Like, who's by your side? Are they good people? Will it be a nice garden? Will we get paid as work? Contractors, are they skilled? Yes. Are they good people? You'd want to make sure, yeah, good people. Okay, get on the happy bus." But I think when you're going doing stuff sort of internationally, if I said to you, Martin, Semken, Drewy, the whole Dean, Nicole, you turn around and go, yeah, yeah, that's good stock, as Mum would say or Dad would say it. And same for yourself. And the APL, the Association of Professional Landscapers, are just a dream team of good people. And Phil is the head on. So I think we sort of co-hosted it. I think before the awards in March just gone, I said to Phil, what am I not allowed to say? And he went, I went, am I allowed to say that? 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 He went, no, 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 no. And then so I walked out on stage and I went, ladies and gentlemen, hey, hello, my name's Peter Donegan. It's a pleasure to be here with you, etc. Welcome's out of the way. I had a conversation with Phil just before I came on stage. Here are all of the things I am not allowed to mention on stage. And Makita were one of the sponsors. So I said, number one, I'm not allowed to wield a chainsaw. Uh, and they went, whoa, because you had the Musk thing around that time where you came out with the chainsaw on stage,
Oh
if
yeah,
you remember.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I went, whoa, easy. Makita are one of our sponsors, and it's a pleasure to have them here today. Next thing, yay, and they all sort of cheered up. I went, number two, I'm not allowed to say that I am Mark Gregory's love child. Hello, Dad. Great to see you again. And sort of the list went on. And so now when I message Mark, I sort of send him a message going, hey, Dad, I'm going to see is typing stops, and I get one back. So it's sort of funny, and somehow or another, with all of the nicest way of saying things, I think you surround yourself with good people. And I was walking off stage, and they asked me would I go and do it again. So apparently they're calling us a comedy duo, which I find a bit insulting because, people seem to find things I say on stage witty, but that was never my intention, which means now you're laughing at me rather than with me, and there's a grave difference between the two. But I've just the APL of a soft spot for them. I really really do. They're just a again. I'll say it, Joel. I leave traps on, go to Melbourne, leave Melbourne, go to France. All have been my second home for periods of 3 weeks or greater. And you head to London where I spend a lot of my time, and life on the road can be a little bit lonely. And you look left and right and you kind of go, yeah, this isn't hard work. How did I end up on this stage? How did I get here? And I know you could, like, there's a joke in there, but there's also a serious part where you got to say hello, goodbye, thank you, take your shoes off so you don't dirty the mother-in-laws or the mother's sort of carpet, and just remain humble, and I'm genuinely humbled and honored. Yeah. And again, I'll say it, look, how delightful it is to sit and speak with you and see your lovely mush again, Joel. You're a handsome looking gentleman, and it's really, I missed you, man. I missed you.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved having you back on. It's been the longest episode we've done in a while, so that goes to show how much I love having you on. So, and that's just not because you talk a lot. That's also because yeah, am interested in what you're saying and love hearing it. So, thank you very much for coming on, and I'm looking forward to seeing when you pop into Melbourne to design your garden. So we'll catch up then.
Well, fingers crossed. Somebody says we should get that intelligent, good-looking, handsome body of a god fella with the funny accent across here to do something between now and then. And you never know. Life has a funny way of, working things out for me sometimes. And yeah, but 2 Street, Joel, genuinely, I mean it, man. I'm your biggest fan. And I don't usually talk at length this much, but you have a tendency to remain quiet. And I know from listening to you, I have you in my ear literally every single week. So I know when you're going to step in and you're going to let people ramble. And yeah, but it's a pleasure to be back on the Landscaping Podcast. And please don't use my voice as the intro for.
I'll put it at the end. So to reward people who listen all the way to the end, I'll just have that'll be the last thing people hear.
Okay, if you're going to put that at the end, will you do me a favor? Yeah, and I'll tag team with you here. You can do me ripping the mick out of you, but you got to rip the tripartite clip of the Irish commentators and stick that in
Yeah,
after that as well.
that
Okay?
that requires a lot more time for me to work out how to do that, but I'll do it just for you and Troy Barrett.
Yeah, like a L'Oreal advert, Joel, because I'm worth it. Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast.
I shouldn't put that in. I'll put that in instead of me saying it.
Oh no, Jesus, don't do that. That's like you doing the top of the morning. That's useless. People will shoot me for that.
Mix it up a bit though.
There's mixing it up and then there's taking the mic.
Manning. The 5 minutes are nearly done. The referee will add a few more on. Darrow Shea's header. Nathan Collins in after it. Willie Orban across for Hungary. Are they going to be able to hold out? Orban's clearance up the field. The referee letting play continue. One last throw of the dice. It's all on this from Queevy Kelleher. Scales is up after it. Scales wins the header. There's a chance! Yeah! Oh, there's the goal! There's the goal! That's Troy Parrott. That is unbelievable. He scored a hat-trick. And right at the death, Ireland have done it. I've never seen anything like it. Absolutely remarkable. Right at the end, Hungary had been caught. They were hanging on. It seems like for the whole night. Certainly when it went 2-2. This is just stunning. 3-2. The time is up. The referee has to finish the game. I've no voice left.